So hello, everyone. Good evening, good afternoon. Welcome to this week's weekly Dharma gathering. So we're just going to do a few housekeeping things before I make the introductions of uh, Devin tonight. Um, so just a reminder or a note that tonight's session is being recorded. So if you prefer not to be seen, you can turn off your camera, mute your camera feature or stop your camera feature. And if you ask a question on camera, you'll also be recorded. So we always want to give the option for people to ask questions in the chat. That's great, and I can see that. So you can ask questions anytime in the chat box if they arise for you during the guided meditation or the talk. And then I will let the teacher answer those questions. So the recording, each recording is usually accessible within 48 hours, or if you're a subscriber, a monthly or yearly subscriber, you'll receive an auto-generated email from Venmo, I believe. Okay. So hello, everyone, and welcome to Weekly Dharma Gathering. So glad you're here. I know there's a lot going on. I know we have a lot of Zoom fatigue, as well as a lot of fatigue, but it's good to see you. We're really happy that you're here. My name is Shantae Paradigm Smalls. I use they, them pronouns, and I am one of the co-founders of Weekly Dharma Gathering. So we've been doing this for almost 2 years, since February 2019. So we're really glad you're here. Tonight's session will be led by one of our fan favorites, a wonderful teacher, Devin Barry, and he's gonna give a talk. He'll lead us through guided meditation, give a Dharma talk, and then we'll close with Q&A. So I'm just gonna read bio and then I will turn it over to Devin is deeply committed to the personal and collective, and I'll also put this in the chat, the personal and collective liberation of marginalized community, knowing that through the integration of reflection and insight, clarity and wisdom give rise to wise action. Devin is a community teacher with East Bay Meditation Center in Oakland, California, co-founded the Teen Sangha and the Men of Color Sangha. He was a core teacher with the San Francisco POC Sangha and is a founding teacher of Deep Time Liberation. DTL explores the intersection of Dharma, ancestral legacy, and collective healing as it specifically relates to the African diaspora. Devin is currently in the 2017-2021 Insight Meditation Teacher Training. He has over 20 years of meditation experience. So please help me welcome Devin for teaching us.
Thank you, Shate. Thank you. So I'm Devin, he, him pronouns. It's what I prefer. I'm calling in from Northampton, Massachusetts, the lands of the Wampanoag and Nipmuc. I grew up in the lands of the Chickasaw and Choctaw in Kansas and Oklahoma and Texas. And I'm a recent transplant to Northampton from San Francisco, Oakland, and LA, where I spent the last 27 years. Yeah, happy to be here with you all. So I'm gonna lead us in a short sit, 20 minutes. I'll guide the first part of it and then leave enough space for some quiet and silence, and then I'll offer some reflections and hopefully you'll engage with me in some questions or comments. So just allowing yourself to settle in and be as comfortable as you can be right now. Alert, yet comfortable. If you need to move around, get yourself settled, raise and lower the shoulders, move your neck, release any tension from the jaw. Do all that. Take a couple of deep breaths even. And then using your attention to just look at the body as a whole and see if there's any releasing, any holding that's there that you can release. You can allow yourself to have eyes open or eyes closed. And the meditation object that I'll be describing is mostly using the body, like the full sense of the body sitting. So contact of your bottom on the cushion or the back on a pillow, feet on the ground, hands on lap or clasp, and getting a sense of the body sitting, the body breathing. Sit and know you're sitting. You may be accustomed to or observe the breathing, warm or cool air at the nostrils. One of the anchors, just knowing the felt sensation there, rise and fall at the chest or in and out at the belly. The meditation object isn't as important as your relationship to the object. So coming to that and being with that with some sense of kindness as we can, or gentleness as we can. Again, just a sense of the body sitting or lying down or standing. And there may be sleepiness or the mind distracted or pulled away with thoughts. That's okay. It's the mind's job to think. And again, it's our relationship to our meditation practice and meditation object that's the important thing. So, with the sense of loving awareness or kindness or gentleness, we come back to the anchor, the breath in the body, sensations in the body. Thank you for sitting with me. It's always something when you have coffee late in the afternoon and then you just have this sit. It's just, I feel it all running through the body, just everything. So I wanted to talk a little bit tonight, offer some reflections. And typically what I like to do is I will offer some reflections for 10 minutes or so, and I will keep going. And it's absolutely fine at that point. If you 10 minutes in, if you have a question or something, I don't, I like to actually have the reflections altered and be able to engage you in that way. I can hold both of those. So, and if not, I'll say, I'm gonna finish this part and then we'll just go from there. So I wanted to offer some reflections on awareness as a refuge. And I chose that because I think clearly this year has been, I mean, it's undescribable or horrific is usually what comes to mind for me. And I had an opportunity recently to spend 5 weeks on self-retreat. And I understand that is an absolute gift and a privilege. That's not what most people are doing or able to do. But I had the opportunity and I took it. And people often ask when I go on retreat, because I've spent a good deal of time in long intensive retreats, long periods of time. And people always ask, well, what's the value of that? Or what did you learn? Or what was the insight? And I realized on this retreat that the insight happened about 15 minutes into me being there, the big insight, the big takeaway, 15 minutes. And when my partner and I dropped off all my stuff and they drove off and I'm inside this cabin and cell service wasn't there. And I turned the laptop off. I realized finally, for the first time since March, since lockdown #1, since the beginning, the beginning of the pandemic, because Black folks have always been getting killed, so that has never left me. That's always there. That this was the first time that I actually got to grieve, mourn, and rest. And I knew that that was on the horizon or there because I stood in the middle of the room completely confused. I had a little bag of candies that I'll have one a day. It was gonna last me for 5 weeks. I stood in the middle of the room and I ate every single one of them. Anything that I had was sweet, I took care of it within those first 15 minutes. And I realized that this was the mind still an attempt to not mourn, grieve, and rest. And there's a big yellow, what they call the lazy boy, in front of a huge picture window. And I pushed it over to the window and I sat in the chair and I sat back in the chair, not to meditate. I was going to take a nap at this point. This was about taking a nap. This was about resting. And there were just tears. So what came up was just tears. And I realized that in having my teacher hat on, it allowed me to have an identity that I know, and that I can take care of, and I can assess what's going on. And I can do some of that some days. On a good day, I can do that. But what I actually found out was in doing all of that, I never actually mourned. I never actually grieved. I went through the anger stage and trying to find my agency and my voice to help and contribute and to do things, which is important. Compassion without that individual agency to actually do something. Fierce compassion is what you want to do. The compassion where, I feel for you. I feel for you as, I feel for you as I feel for you. And thank you, but it's the agency, the individual agency of actually some sort of action. And I realized that needed this mourning and this grieving. And so what was I mourning and grieving? Obviously, it was all that was happening in the world in terms of the pandemic, the sheer numbers of people dying. I just didn't even know what to do with those numbers. And I had an opportunity to work with a couple of frontline workers at a hospital on the telephone then. And it was really just listening to them, right? It was supposed to be, they were doing guided meditations for them, but it really just turned into just them needing to be able to share what was going on for them. And mourning and grieving and being quite fiery yet again for what seemed like on a daily basis, Black and queer and trans folk dying. And the anger and rage from that is just from, it's never a story. It's never a story. It's something on social media passed around a few folks and a few communities, but in terms of it being a full-fledged, this is happening in our country, this is happening to our fellow siblings and sons and daughters and children, isn't a story. And so there's a lot of fiery energy around that. And I didn't have a chance to mourn that, and I didn't have a chance to grieve. I saw the pictures, I saw the names, I said the names, I repeated them, I posted about them, and it didn't really absorb the body in a somatic way until I actually had to, stop myself, And the only reason, I mean, honestly, right? I didn't have cell service. I couldn't do what I think is a Sharon Salzberg calls, which is my favorite word now, doom scrolling, right? Scrolling on the phone, picking up the phone to find that thing, that next horrible story, that next bad story. And once I couldn't doom scroll, then I had to look here. Then I actually had to turn and look here. Take a look at what I was doing, take a look at my contribution, take a look at, can I just be with the weight and gravity of this deep sadness and this deep wounding? Can I just be with that? And so once I was able to once I was able to be with that, then that's when there were tears. And this was over the course of the day, me sitting there being able to get this out and actually and voice it and to really be able to voice it. And probably like a lot of cis men, I'm a 54-year-old Black cis man, right? To voice that kind of that grieving, that wailing, all the condition and family dynamics and everything just has never really allowed that to be. And I've been a Dharma practitioner for a long time and a teacher for a while, and there's some of that there, but it's only been truly expressed, when I've been sitting on retreat for 6 months by myself, but that's like, I'm never sure if it's because I'm just this side of psychosis or if it's really actually, I'm really actually diving into something. Never quite sure. This I knew that this wasn't psychosis. I was actually in my right mind and here and present and fully here. And with that is shame and guilt. Shame and guilt for not singing to the rafters, from not shouting to the rafters, my disappointment and my heartbreak around the deaths of queer and trans folks. It's easy to do it around Black men, right? People look at me and then, they'll invite me to a panel, invite me to this and that. That's easy. That's easy. Yeah, I've had my ass whooped by cops. I know that world. I know the systems. I know all of those things. And there's something in there that's really interesting that allows me to hide in that. Not that, right? I'm not saying that's not important. Important. I'm just saying it touched me deeply that um, those that were easily skip over, don't take in, don't include, and I was feeling it. I was feeling it. You know, I've been workshopped to death and educated and know lingo and jargon and all sorts of things, but it wasn't until then. I'm 54 years old until that moment that it actually was there with me. And so at that point, all my plans for my retreat had sort of just gone out of the window, what I was planning to do. And I realized, okay, so the mourning and grieving is what needs to happen. So how can I continue to be with this mourning and grieving? And it's just, well, I was aware of that. And I thought, well, I'm aware of that. So then it's awareness itself. Awareness as a practice is what I will do for the rest of the time there. And there was a lot of reflection because I had a similar experience when I moved to San Francisco years ago. When I first got to San Francisco, right, there were hundreds, thousands of men dying in San Francisco, and I was a really young man, and I didn't know what to do with that. Right, I didn't mourn and grieve that. They were in the process, and so when you're in your 20s partying and there are thousands of people around you dying, then you become numb. So it's just, I got higher and higher and higher and higher and higher, as high as I possibly could, to not feel or be with that, because I didn't know what to do with it. I didn't know what to do with the numbers. I didn't know what to do with the rejection of the community by the media, the mainstream media, and everyone else at that time. And it was a mirror, but at that time I had no tools to work with. Now I have some tools to work with. So it was really interesting to see that play out. And so I realized as I decided to just, a few of the things I was actually doing is literally using a mental inquiry. Am I aware right now? What is most present for me right now? What's most obvious in my experience right now? Those were inquiry questions that I was coming back to over and over and over again. I'd written them on Post-its and posted them on the door. They were above the sink. They were on the fridge. They were at the front. They were all over so that I could not see these inquiry notes that I had for myself. And that all helped to keep me present. Because awareness is only there in the present moment. Awareness's job is just to know. And that awareness, that isn't going to be enough by itself, but that's the step. That's where you first have to be. And what I noticed is that as I was just getting a sense through the meditative process and through this inquiry, these light mental notes, that as I was looking out into nature and being in nature and walking around, and when I say looking out and looking at nature, because then the other thing kicks in is that I'm in a rural area. And so knowing the socio-political world that we're in order for me to not deal with anxiety on 11 rather than 10, at times, I chose to be inside and look at the nature from inside this giant, beautiful picture window. Occasionally I could get out and walk. But what I noticed in sitting there at the time of year that I was there, so this is September and October, big, beautiful trees that are just now changing from green to red and orange. It's Western Massachusetts, that time fall, absolutely beautiful. And I'm noticing then that just, as it going a couple more weeks, the wind kicks up, the leaves begin to fall from the trees, and the leaves are then twirling and fluttering and twirling and fluttering, and then rocketing down to the ground, and then caught by wind and moved. And they're going really incredibly fast, but then they gently and gracefully land on the ground and dissolve. And when you sit in a chair long enough, rather than being just the side of psychosis, you watch that scene over and over again, you realize that, oh, we are nature. This is what plays out with us. This is what plays out in our lives. This is what plays out in society over and over and over again. And I realized that awareness, actually me being with awareness, taking refuge in awareness, allowed me enough time to slow down, to grieve, to mourn, to have a sense of myself as a part of nature rather than separate from nature. It was something that I had read. So it was on the mourning and grieving. I want to go back to that for a second. And it's because I see the sacred world behind you, right? So the sacred world sign that I'm seeing now is, in a sense, in looking for awareness and coming home to the mind, because awareness actually is the home of the mind. That's the home of the mind. That's where we're trying to get back to. It allows you to touch the experience of the sacred world, which in some ways, if I really look at that, there's a real sense of being on sacred ground at that point, of actually being in the nature and being with it for that time and awareness. But this is on joy and sorrow. Then a person said, "Speak to us of joy and sorrow." And they answered, "Your joy is your sorrow unmasked. The same well from which your laughter rises, oftentimes filled with your tears. How else can it be? The deeper that sorrow carves into your being, the more joy you can contain. It's not the cup that holds your wine, the very cup that was burned in the potter's oven, and is not the lute that soothes your spirit, the very wood that was hollowed with knives. When you are joyous, look deep into your heart, and you shall find that it is only that which has given you sorrow, that which is giving you joy. When you are sorrowful, look again in your heart, and you shall see that in truth you are weeping for that which has been your delight. Some of you say joy is greater than sorrow, and others say, nah, sorrow is the greater. But I say unto you, they are inseparable. Together they come, and when one sits alone with you at your board, remember that the other is asleep upon your bed. Verily, you are suspended like scales between your sorrow and your joy. Only when you are empty are you at standstill and balanced. When the treasure keeper lifts you to weigh their gold and their silver, needs must your joy or sorrow rise or fall. So I found interesting. Sometimes I feel like I know what it means. Sometimes I feel like I don't know what it means. And so the joy and sorrow. So in looking at all of those things, what I found is that, yeah, I did have my time to mourn, and I did have my time to grieve. And out of that, it's like there is some joy. There is some joy and some grace that is here. When I have an understanding that, particularly for Black folks, 400 years on a place that was founded by folks hell-bent on genocide and enslavement, and I look at the various strands of our ancestral lines, that we have survived that and thrived, and that people still have agency, and people are heartbroken and broken, but they're not done or finished. We're not done or we're not finished. There are communities across the BIPOC spectrum, across gender identities, that are coming together to actually be a catalyst for change. And there's a lot of fucking joy in that. There's a lot of beauty in that. And we forget, it's forgotten, and we forget, right? I get caught up in my doom scrolling, right? You get me between Rachel Maddow and Amy Goodman, shit, the world's gonna end tomorrow. And I forget that I look at the very first teacher that I had was a man named Isan Dorsey, in San Francisco at the Hartford Street Zen Center. And I remember I was like, went in hot. That's all I can say. I went in hot. Hot mess. This was it's a little teeny tiny Dharma center in the Castro. He taught a couple times. The only time you'd ever be able to go to like a half day or day long, and the teacher comes out and it's had like 3 outfit changes. I'm just like, dude, really? Like, but it was that felt like home to me. That felt like home. I could get down with that. I'm like, it just, right? This isn't a grim endeavor. The practice is not a grim endeavor, and I don't accept it to be a grim endeavor. And I love the fact that he'd be in an orange robe and he'd come out, he'd be in a blue robe, you know, way back. So he was a drag queen back in the like late 50s. So every now and then he would like pull this whole, anyway, it was beautiful. It was beautiful. And he didn't mind. Like I said, I was a hot mess, you know, I wouldn't actually sit for the meditation. I would go to the back just outside and smoke a cigarette. They would do the meditation. Once the meditation was over, then I would come in for a talk. And he let me do it. I was off the hook, but he just, the time it takes is the time it takes, is what he would tell me. And I look at that. And that's what got me through those times. I was like, okay, so this wasn't, there was joy that was there. There were people that were catalysts for change, that were making contributions. And that is there also. I'm trying to slow down and catch up to myself. So there was just one other thing I was going to say, and then yeah, I would love to hear from you all. So sometimes when I'm on retreat, I occasionally over the last many years have had a tinnitus in my ear. So it's a ringing in the ear, which I used to see as problematic or really like detrimental, or just it's going to be impossible to practice, impossible to meditate. But using refuge as awareness, like I said in the meditation, what I've learned is that the meditation object itself doesn't matter. It's the relationship to the object. That's the important thing. That's my mantra that I come back to over and over and over again. So the tinnitus, the ringing in my ear, became the meditation object. So now there's Devin listening to the ringing in the ears. The listening to the ringing in the ears, it's easy for the mind to glom onto that, to attach to that. And it just becomes a sound of silence. Everything else fades to the background. Everything else recedes. And it allows me to actually settle. My nervous system settles. My body is able to rest. My heart is able to rest. My heart, right? The mind quiets, the heart opens up. And it reminds me, there's I believe, Tibetan teacher, 14th century, or maybe Chan teacher, who uses this mantra: out of the soil of friendliness grows the great bloom of compassion, watered by the tears of joy and sheltered under the cool shade of the tree of equanimity. And I realized that was the 5 weeks. That summed up the 5 weeks. It was that soil, the soil of friendliness, and all the shit, right? Black people dying left and not dying. Black people being murdered left and right. People died in the pandemic. Black people are murdered. Trans people are murdered. Queer people are murdered. And out of that soil of friendliness, that there are people that love them. There are families, there are supporters, there are people that are acting and serving as catalysts for change. There's something quite beautiful for that, and that can't be lost and shouldn't be lost. And that's the great bloom of compassion that grows out of that. It brings, right? I see to millions of us coming together in that way. Watered by all those tears, the tears of sadness and tears that are joy, and sheltered under the cool shade of the tree of equanimity, because in dealing with 400 years of relentless white supremacy, you best use any and all bit of your practice to maintain some balance. And those of us without a practice, or even if you didn't have a practice, right? That's at that point, at this point, this is cellular for us. This is ancestral. We know how to survive. We know how to thrive. We just have to, you know, every now and then turn the damn phone off, turn the computer off every now and then, you know. We can do that. I've taken to doing a power down day. So one day a week, I'm without any technology at all. And I'm not saying that like, oh, you know, everybody should do. It's hard as hell to do, right? There's like, I'm, you know, in front of the phone, like, well, let me turn it on for a minute. And it's incredibly hard, but it's the best thing that I've done just over these last several months. It is the best thing that I've done once a week without it. Get outside, walk around, do some things. If you put me in a research lab, you'd probably find that on those days I'm actually eating a lot more. So there's that, but you know, hey. Like I said, I had coffee late, so I'm gonna stop myself. Like my mama said, there's one thing that you cannot do. You cannot stop yourself from talking. I'm proving her wrong in this moment. I'm stopping myself from talking, and I want to engage with you all.
Thank you so much, Devin. So I just want to remind people that we are recording. So if you have a question that you'd like to ask, please feel free to unmute yourself. You'll be recorded. I'll also spotlight you. Or if you feel shy, you can ask your question in the chat and I will relay it to our teacher.
And it's all fair game. So anything you have, question, comments, any of it. Hello.
Hi, Devin.
Hi.
Thank you so much for your teaching. I've been wanting to actually sit with you and learn, because I know you've been on Weekly Dharma Gathering a few times before. So I was like, oh, okay, I'm gonna see Devin. I have a question about what you said during your initial, like the first, regarding a retreat experience. And you said something along the lines of like the overwhelm of emotions that happens, and like in comparison to you were discerning like between the overwhelm of emotions in that moment, in this particular instance, this fall, with the like overwhelm that like inevitably happens like in a 6 month or longer retreat. I would love to hear a little bit more from you about that. I guess, yeah, I would love, to hear a little bit more.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I think the rush and overwhelm of emotion that I felt immediately really let me know just how much suffering, how much wounding, how horrific this year has been. Is that this is 15 minutes in, and it also speaks to how little I was actually in deep silence or true reflective silence over the many months. It speaks to that, right? Because now all of a sudden there's just the birds and the crickets and everything else, and without my phone and everything, and it was a rush right there, right? I've always had something in the background that's taken, which there's a fantastic article fairly recently in the New Yorker about ambient TV shows, Emily in Paris, TV shows that just don't mean a damn thing. It doesn't mean anything. It's just a show to put on in the background so you don't feel like you're alone. It's that kind of thing. And being on retreat, right? All those things are going to come up, right? It's as the mind quiets down, as the mind truly quiets down and the nervous system settles and the body settles, all of that, then it's going to unearth all sorts of feelings and emotions and things that some we have intentionally shoved down, others that are just there, hid, sort of in the background until there's some quiet, some time to reflect. Does that make, am I making Yeah. Okay. So there's some there. There's something in there. And it's not that when I'm saying overwhelm of emotion, that is a bad thing at all. That's what's there. It's actually like a good thing. It's a cleansing. It's a cleansing. It's a purification process that you know that I see it, and it's actually quite faith producing in the faith evoking in the practice, because you see that you don't fall through the pit of despair. You don't fall through, that your practice can actually hold you. The practice can actually hold you. And for me, and I say the practice, and I didn't talk, but at some time I'll come and talk, because I am work with quite often my ancestral lineages and sort of the ancestral realm. So between those two things, right, I'm always going back to my ancestral line, all that they lived through and lived with. That's in me. So that strength and that resilience and that recovery is in me. So when that meets my practice, I don't fall through anything. There's nowhere that I cannot be. There's nothing that I cannot do. And I keep them with me. I have back there's cotton plants, a cotton plant from Port Gibson, Mississippi. That's the land that my grandfather, that my ancestors were enslaved on. They're still with me. And it's not that I don't have freak out, right? I've overwhelm and freak out and go off. Yeah, I can go off quickly.
Hi, Devin. I have a question. I'll add my
Mhm.
here. I so right now it's ending right now, but currently, as you were teaching, there was a lawn
Black Buddhist.
Black and Buddhist book. So I told Pamela, I said, sorry, you know, I'm hosting Devin tonight.
Yeah.
But I have been talking to a lot of Black Buddhists, but also Asian diasporic Buddhists, Indigenous Buddhists, Latinx Buddhists, and some white Buddhists too, particularly about something that is fairly alive in the lineage from which I come, Vajrayana Buddhism, but seems very particular with a lot of Black Buddhists I talked to, and Asian Buddhists I talked to, which is the ancestral practices. And I see it as something actually very positive inside of Western Dharma. For instance, when you were just talking, I was thinking about, you know, just like my family, both sides of my mother's family, from the same lands as Harriet Tubman, you know, so Harriet Tubman is to me in my practice the Eastern Shore of Maryland. But I'm wondering if you could say a little bit more about, you know, your relationship or between, you know, ancestral practice, how it works inside of your, or with, or doesn't with your Dharma practice.
Yeah, it's you know, right now for me it is hand in hand, it is integral. It's you know, out loud and quite expressive when I'm at home or other places teaching. Sometimes I'm in institutional places and, you know, I'm doing this is record. I don't need to go into all that. Institutions are going to institute. So I act accordingly, but my ancestors are with me. They allow me to be in those places. So for me, it's really, when I look at sort of this idea of no self, even when I'm in, or actually some of the practices that I like doing are concentration practices. There's some very specific practices using kasinas. I have one on the wall that's the bottom of a root tree that shows the roots of a redwood tree magnified like 10,000 times or something. It's all these interconnected things. So I use something like that as a mantra. And what I have done is I have dove into my actual ancestry familial lines, and I know their stories. I know their death certificates. I know their pictures. I know their oral, as much as I possibly could, as much as I possibly can. I've visited their lands. I have dirt from their lands. I've slept on the plantation on the eastern shore of Virginia, you know, getting down to that little tip of land down there, and in Mississippi. So I have been with them, and it feels like I had always been doing things externally to meet or talk with or get to know the ancestors, but it feels like I honored them by finding them, by acknowledging them, by seeing them on a deep level, and I feel like that has been revealed to me then now in my meditation practices. It feels like it's sometimes in deeper states of meditation or certain states of meditation, then there's an old ancestral feeling, an intuitive feeling that I have, that it almost feels like somebody has tapped the various cellular memories of my ancestors, and that comes alive in me. That is, like, drives, at this point, that drives my meditation. When the first time I did long meditation in that was in the master's bedroom of the plantation that my family was enslaved on, and in the slave quarters, it's, you know, my life has profoundly shifted and changed since that point. And it feels like I went to go get my ancestors. I went to go get them. And that's what they wanted. It feels like that's what was wanted. And there's more. Yeah, I'd love to have a conversation about that sometime. Yeah, there's more.
Thank you so much.
I can't practice without them. I can't. My practice isn't separate from them at this point.
Devin, thank you so much for your incredible vulnerability, and also for sharing that experience of intuitive connection with ancestors and the way that they drive your practice. I'm really moved to tears, really powerful and helpful for me, for some experiences I've had that have been hard to explain.
Yeah.
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 So I wanted to share that. And I'm a Dharma teacher as well. And so I also just was deeply moved by your beginning description of being a teacher, holding space for people during the pandemic. And I got this feeling of the tremendous space that opened up in that 5 weeks, even in the first 15 minutes, as you said, like it wasn't even just the 5 weeks, it was like the 15 minutes of the context and the preparation and everything that allowed for that space to open up. And yeah, I've been feeling it this year, just a lot of holding space for others and trying to make space to make sure to hold myself and take care of myself. And also, I have a retreat coming up that's just a couple days long next week. And I guess I'm just like, I mean, I think I know what'll happen is basically I'll go and make it 2 days or 5 weeks, and I'm just going to open the way that I need to open, right? But yeah, if you had anything to say about that, like when it can't be 6 months, when it can't be 5 weeks, just to really, yeah.
Well, one is to, I mean, and you're already speaking to it, to be as open to it as you possibly can. Like the expectation cannot be there. The expectation cannot be there. If you like attached to some outcome or some specific result, that cannot be there. And if it is there, right? I mean, right, because it's going to pop up. As much as I want to say, oh, I don't have expectations for this, secretly I do. You know, I don't, you know, I don't really want you to get hurt. I just want the truck to splash water and mud all over you. Something, right? It's just like all that stuff is there. It's all there. And I'm really what I'm seeing is the more that I can just name it and say it and voice it, then it feels the freer, and the freer I actually am, the freer I can actually be. So I would go on the retreat. Like if there's a particular, plan that you have, I would just try to, I mean, hold it, just knowing it could completely blow up. The plan could completely blow up. And that what may most be needed, and some of what you said right there, could be rest, could be sleep. Like if you end up sleeping a lot, like this is getting, people get down on themselves. I just slept through the whole meditation. I'm sleeping all the time. This happens. There is the hindrances are there at some point, but when you first get there, it's like, oh, graceful surrender, sleep. Okay, I've slept for 10 hours. Great. Right? The talk that you heard on Monday night, the person that's giving the talk on Tuesday night, it's the same damn talk. We're pointing in the same direction. The rest, take the rest that you need, take the time that you need, right? Care for self. Maybe that's the meditation the entire time. Being intentional about caring for you. Allow that to be.
Yeah, thank you. I love your description of the like catty response, the like, I just want you to get splashed up and get some mud on you. It's just like room for all of it,
Yeah,
Just
there's room
the
for
patience
it's
of it.
all there, I mean, I could come and
Yeah.
wrap my Dharma shawl around you, give you the nice, quiet, soft voice, that whole thing. But we know people. Come on.
Oh
We
yeah.
know
Yeah.
people.
Yeah. Mhm. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I don't really have a question. I just want to thank you. That was really lovely. I just finished doing Rohatsu from home, and that was a fascinating experience. And like listening to everything you were sharing, I was like, yeah, right. Like I didn't have any expectation. And I had within minutes profound realization, oh, quarantine is not retreat.
Yep. Yep.
So,
I've just been listening to people for this entire year talking about this as a pause and quarantine. We don't pause life. There's no pause in life. There's no pause, and quarantine is not retreat. And we do the best we can. We bring, right? Well, we don't even bring the practice home. The practice is at home right now. And we do what we can there. One of my most favorite teachers was a woman in the Bay Area. She's since retired. She was a Burmese teacher, Dr. Tintin. And when you would go to her place, there wasn't actually a meditation hall there. There was an orchard and a kitchen and all these other things. So they were teaching that the meditation was all of these things and within all of these things. And if you wanted to sit, then you would sit right under the ground, under the tree or somewhere in the orchard. But I just had removed the entire idea of this formal sitting meditation, right? Just to get it in our hearts and our minds that it takes place anywhere, the sacred world. Again, the sacred world. It's in the kitchen. It's in the bathroom. It's on the train. It's in the car. It's all there.
Well, thank you so much, Devin, for teaching us. That was amazing. So I'll let you say your last words, but I just wanted to make a couple of announcements that this recording will be available within 48 hours of me doing stuff and sending it to the tech person. Next week's Dharma gathering is led by some person named Shantae Paradigm Walls. I don't know who that is, but I'll be teaching on guided rest, and I can plop the link in there. And then the week after that, our last weekly Dharma gathering for the year is with our good friend Kate Johnson. It's a rescheduled talk, and it's on the 23rd. Truth, Beauty, Power: Finding Refuge in the Shitstorm. So yeah, I'll put these in the chat once I figure out how to do that. Oh, here we go. So I will turn it back over to Devin.
Thank you all for being here with me and watching and witnessing my wackiness and my way and taking me in and accepting me, and much love to you all. And may I be as loving in this moment as possible. If I cannot be loving in this moment, may I be kind. If I cannot be kind, may I be non-judgmental. If I cannot be non-judgmental, may I not cause harm. Awareness is your refuge. Awareness of the changingness of feelings, of attitudes, of moods, of material change and emotional change. Stay with that, because it's a refuge that's indestructible. It's not something that changes. It's a refuge you can trust in. This refuge is not something you could create. It's not an ideal. It's practical, it's simple, it's easily overlooked and not noticed. When you are mindful, you're beginning to notice. Right now, it's like this.
Thank you so much. And thank you all for coming. And we'll see you again. Be well, everyone. Stay safe.
Thank you.
Thank you. And
Bye.
thanks for hosting, Shante.
Thank you. Thank you, Shante.
Thank you, Devin.